I walked into my house and heard my mother whisper, "Am I a witch? Am I a bad mother?" Like a prayer she didn't believe in anymore. Her scarf had slipped just enough to show a bruise fading yellow and green along her jaw. "Tell me if you came home to that, would you breathe first or break something?" It was one of those heavy, quiet nights where the air feels padded, no music from the kitchen, no clatter of plates, just the AC humming and the old clock in the hall ticking like it had an opinion. I set my phone down face first, not to be dramatic, just to stop myself from using it as a shield. You ever feel a house hold its breath? Like the walls already know the answer, and they're waiting to see whether you're brave enough to ask the right question. I sat beside my mother, straightened the scarf with 2 fingers, the way you set a glass down so it doesn't wake a sleeping table, and I said, "Breathe with me, Mom. Slow in, slow out, I'm here." Her pulse was hummingbird fast. I have done deals that move markets. I have signed papers that ripple across continents, and none of it mattered in that moment. Because all I could think was, who did this to my mother? Pattern interrupt. I looked up. In the corner of the ceiling, a tiny red light winked the quiet little eye I'd installed years ago, not because I didn't trust, because I've met people. Yeah, that happened. I kissed my mother's hair, told her I'd be right back, then walked to my office with my hands open at my sides so I wouldn't clench them into something that would need drywall later. My office smells like cedar and ink because I want it to control in the middle of mess. I closed the door, soft, not a slam, because control first rage later and brought the wall of monitors to life. You ever watch your own home blink awake in front of you? Hallways you've stopped noticing, corners you've forgotten you own. Suddenly telling you a story you didn't ask to hear. The living room feed lit up, and there she was, my wife, Clara, moving through the room like she owned the oxygen silk blouse, neat hair, the kind of poise people confuse for character when they're dazzled by shine. I scrubbed the timeline back an hour, saw my mother set down a tray of tea, shoulders a little forward, the way kind people make themselves smaller, hoping the world will be gentle. Clara leaned in, lips tight, eyes bright with that sharp little pleasure some folks get when they've found a soft place to press. Then the hand. Quick, flat, not for noise, for control. And my mother reeled back, catching herself on the couch, one palm on that scarf, like it could hold her together. I watched it twice, then a third time, because facts matter when fury wants to lie to you. Do you think that's fair? Seeing something like that and not ripping the screen off the wall. My knuckles pushed into the desk until the wood complained, and that's when the house answered back, a whisper through the vent from the hallway, staff voices trying to be careful and not careful enough. She shouldn't have to go through this. The missus is dangerous. People disappear around her. Disappear. Not gossip, a pattern. Listen, this is where the story tilts if you let it. I could have stormed down the hall and blown the doors off, the place turned dinner into a scene we'd all pretend to forget tomorrow. But justice needs oxygen, and time and rage eats both. So I made a decision the size of a phone call. Not to a lawyer, to detectives. The ones who once gave me a look across a gala ballroom that said, "We know that woman's smile." I said 3 words, and even at dawn they felt heavy. I have footage. Before they arrived, I walked to the dining room. Clara was there, scrolling her phone like the house was a hotel lobby. "You're home early," she said, and she smirked at the stem of her wine glass, the way some people smirk at a mirror. "Why is my mother crying?" I asked. Not a shout, not a threat, just a bill placed on the table you intend to collect. Because she's dramatic, Marcus. You know how old women get. And then like she was talking about rearranging furniture. Someone had to remind her she's not the queen here. Remind. That word. I nodded once the way you click, save on a file that matters, turned and walked out. It looked like retreat. It was AIM. 2 plainclothes officers stepped through the mudroom after sunrise, shoes squeaking against marble that isn't used to that sound. No sirens, no neighbors. I showed them the footage. One leaned forward and set his jaw, the other exhaled like the puzzle they'd been working finally offered a corner piece. We've been watching her for years, he said, voice low, steady. Different names, different cities, 3 marriages on paper, a handful, off the books, aging in-laws, isolated every time, complaints sealed, settlements paid, and 2 who never turned up again. You hear that and think coincidence, or do you hear the same song, a chorus that never changes? I handed them everything. Angles, audio, time stamps, the ledger of truth. They told me to sit tight, not to confront, not to tip a person like Clara, who knows how to melt into a new name before lunch. I agreed. Agreement is easier when you've already seen what you needed to see. Here comes the twist, and I wish it was the last one. The detectives had a document from another state buried in a probate file, a signature that looked like my mother's. Someone had been opening lines of credit in her name, moving small amounts just under the flags, using handwriting close enough to fool a bank's software. A visiting doctor had been scheduled to evaluate her competency, the kind of visit that can tilt a life into a hallway of locked doors if you're not paying attention. My face stayed calm. My blood did not. If it were you, what would you have done? I went back to the monitors scrubbed the day before yesterday in real time. There was Clara at the foyer, soft voice and warm smile, a clipboard for the home nurse, the kind of sweetness that makes the smell of smoke look like a candle. She placed a hand on my mother's shoulder, the way a caring daughter-in-law might then signed, the curve, the flourish too perfect, and guided Evelyn upstairs with a smile that never reached her eyes. A performance. Not the first. Not the last planned. I need to say this plainly because when someone sands your reality down, enough clarity becomes oxygen. My mother isn't weak. She's a Southern woman who survived a marriage that didn't deserve her and raised a son to understand the difference between price and worth. But gaslighting works like drought. It takes repetition. It takes time. It takes the lie of you're confused, poured day after day until your roots crack. When she asked me, am I a witch? Am I a bad mother? She wasn't hunting absolution. She was looking for the floor she's always stood on. That afternoon, the detectives came back with a judge's signature and a plan measured down to the minute. Keep it calm. Keep it quiet. Keep her certain this house still belonged to her story. We want her to walk into her own arrest, one of them said, like he was describing a deer in a clearing, when really he meant a predator who'd memorized the trail cameras. Discretion wasn't about image that day, it was strategy. Fewer variables, fewer exits. 5 o'clock. That time when people with corner offices lie to themselves about leaving early. The garage door rolled, and Clara stepped in wearing a spa-robe towel turban, and all like eucalyptus could absolve paperwork. She froze for half a beat when she saw the 2 men behind me, then gave them the smile that had lifted ropes and softened bouncers and convinced a committee to write a check. Officers, something I can help you with. I watched the smirk crack a thin hairline at the corner of her mouth when one detective read a sentence she never expected to hear in this zip code. You are under arrest. She laughed, quick, sharp, then choked on it when the cuffs clicked. I didn't move. I stood where she'd have to look past me to reach the stairs, And in that second, I wasn't a billionaire or a board chair or the guy with his name on a building downtown. I was a son. My mother's son. You know what I mean. They took her out quiet. The investigation widened like a lens, and the picture that came into focus did not care about the kind of car you park out front. 3 surnames that rotated like seasons. 4 phones. A storage unit billed to a shell company with a familiar email in the contact field. 2 restraining orders withdrawn after settlements regular families would call winning the lottery. Tucked into a county file 2 states over a page of prescription refills in someone else's mother's name, with the dosage climbing month after month. I didn't sleep. I sat through briefings where forms had smells and photographs had rooms you could almost hear. That's when the quiet detective with the gray at his temple asked about a lunch 6 months ago, a harmless meal, a harmless chat with a stranger at the next table. Except the stranger's son is now in their case file. Friendly chance meetings were Clara's favorite fishing holes. She looked for complicated families, aging parents, no one nearby to knock at inconvenient hours. She tried on the role of helpful daughter-in-law before the daughter-in-law even existed. Feel the back of your neck prickle yet. Mid-roll moment. Stick around, because what happened next will blow your mind. I thought the arrest would be the clean break, the fade to credits. It wasn't. The real story was quieter. The house changed, not in big ways. Money loves to show, not a remodel or a painting. In small ways you only notice when the absence that's been pacing your hallway finally sits down. The lilies in the living room smelled like flowers again, not like apology for the antiseptic tucked under the sink. The staff stopped whispering like the air had ears. My mother sat in the garden most mornings, shawl pulled close, both hands around her tea, like she was warming herself on more than steam. Sometimes her lips would still shape the old question out of habit, and I'd kneel next to her chair and let the truth take up space. No, Mom. You are my foundation. You raised me. That isn't weakness, that's power. I cut my travel in half. The first time I told my board money can wait. Family can't. A couple of them blinked like I was speaking a dialect they hadn't learned in business school. That's fine. Shareholders can learn a new language. I took calls from the garden hands jammed in my pockets, letting my voice carry over the hedge to the neighbor who times her mail to my calendar. We all perform for someone. I'm trying to make my performance match my values. Hearings came slow, then quick, then slow again. Justice moves like an old escalator, steady enough if you've got the time, brutal if you fall. Each appearance tightened the pattern. A bank manager in Florida remembered a woman insisting an elderly man was too tired to sign that day. A caregiver in Texas felt a little too much enthusiasm when the new daughter-in-law grabbed the pill organizer. A notary said the handwriting looked good, almost too good, like it practiced in a mirror. And the hard part, 2 files the state changed from missing to presumed dead. I won't dress that in nicer words. It deserves to hurt. I'm not going to sell you a hero story. I'm not a hero. I'm a son who had resources and used them. The nurse who flagged the pills, the neighbor who wrote down a license plate, the detective who kept clipping receipts to a case that kept changing area codes. Those are the heroes. If you're thinking, it's easy when you're rich, let me say something that might sound strange coming from me. Wealth can insulate people from consequence, yes. We've all seen that movie. But it can also be a tool when you remember what it's for. Not to build taller fences, to lay your ladder down, to fund the investigator who won't get pulled off the case because a celebrity did something shiny across town. I'm not asking for a medal. I'm asking people like me to remember the point. Sentencing day. The courtroom had that dry, recycled air that makes everyone itch. Clara sat in a soft suit meant to whisper, "See, I'm harmless," and looked at me like the past could be bought back wholesale if she just found the right coupon. The judge read words that don't forget: dangerous, predatory, calculated, then read numbers meant to speak for time. People expect relief when a gavel drops. What I felt was quieter than relief, like someone shut off a faucet I didn't install. The house exhaled. My chest did too. We drove home and my mother asked if the garden center was still open. She wanted rosemary. She said she'd read somewhere rosemary helps you remember. We bought 3 plants and a small lemon tree because the tag said Meyer, and she liked how it looked written down. She told me a story I'd somehow forgotten about coming home at 8 years old, with a black eye because I told a bigger kid not to call another boy a name. She put a frozen spoon on my cheek that day and said my heart was a good compass. Some things you need to hear twice in a lifetime. Now this is where most videos tie a bow, tell you the house is healed, I'm a better man, the end. Life doesn't do bows. There are nights she wakes and touches her neck like the scarf is still there. There are mornings when my phone dings with a headline about a new case that looks like an old one, and I think about families without cameras in the corner, or sons who can say I have footage to the right person and get a door opened. Do you think that's fair? What do we owe each other not as headlines, as neighbors? And let's talk about the part nobody likes, the part that gets people arguing in the comments. Where's the line between protection and surveillance? I put those cameras in my house and they caught a crime, but cameras can be used to control too, to turn a home into a place where no one breathes right. Power is a blade, it cuts what you aim it at, and sometimes the hand holding it by accident. When you fight online about privacy and safety, remember there are living rooms where a little red light is the only witness anyone believes. If it were you, what tools would you use and where would you set them down? Here's where I land. If your gut is telling you a story and the facts haven't caught up yet, keep collecting facts. Keep asking questions that make people uncomfortable in the right way. Check on your elders, the way you check on your kids. Call the nurse, call the bank, call the detective whose name you mispronounce and apologize later. And when someone you love starts whispering, "Am I a bad mother? Or am I losing my mind?" look them in the eye and tell them the truth. Then back it with action. Paperwork appointments, rides, reminders, all the unglamorous moves that add up to sleeping through the night. To the people who say I should have seen it sooner, that I married poorly, that I brought a wolf inside the gate, you're not wrong to ask how. I've asked myself in uglier words at 3 in the morning. Charm is a uniform. It feels like warmth. It looks like confidence. It says the right thing at the right time. It volunteers at the right charity and knows the maitre d's name at the right restaurant. That's not an excuse. That's an explanation. Accountability starts where explanations end. So talk to me. Do you think I was right to keep it quiet and build the case, or should I have gone loud and public to warn people sooner? Would that have helped? Or would it have given her time to vanish into another name? If it were you, what would you have done at that dining table, at that first whisper through the vent, at that first bruise that looked like a door closing? I want the pushback too. That's how we get better at being neighbors instead of spectators. If this story lit something up in you, anger, resolve a plan. Share it with the person who needs to hear it. Stick around for more, because the next one might be the nudge someone needs to make a call. Subscribe if you want to keep these conversations going, the messy kind that don't fit on a motivational poster. Drop your experience below. Tell me where I missed, where you disagree, what you'd do differently. And if you're living any part of this right now, here's your pattern interrupt. Call. Call the nurse, the bank, the detective, the friend who shows up with a notebook and a steady voice. Because sometimes real power isn't money, it's protection, and protection often starts with one person who refuses to whisper.